I hate the word lecture because it means I'm talking to you, and I don't like that. But I thought probably in the limited time we had, just an hour, probably the best thing to do would be to just talk in general terms about some of the things that I've discovered for myself over 40 years of teaching. Teaching is a noble profession. It's a hard profession. If you do it right, you think of your students constantly, you think of what you're doing with them, what you can do to reach them, to inspire them. And I've had some very good moments in my life. And I've learned a few things, I think, and I'd like to share them with you today. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was invited to do a series of master classes at Utah State University. I was invited to the Boston Piano Festival, which is a week-long event. Gary Iogha, marvelous teacher, invited me, and it consisted of I played a concert the first night, and I had 5 days, 3 hours in the morning of master classes, 2 hours of lecture each afternoon. So I kind of made a lot of notes, and I thought, wow, I'm going to just let out everything that I know about playing the piano. And it was really great because I had a lot of time to talk and explain things and work with students. But we don't have that kind of time here. But I thought that I would talk a little bit about certain things that I've learned through teaching, and also to give you some sense of my philosophy that I've developed over the years for teaching. In order to do that, I'm going to have to do a little biographical talk because I think the only way to make it clear to you how I arrived at certain conclusions was to give you some of my personal experiences. I was born near Rochester, New York, and at the age of 9, I started at the preparatory department at Eastman School of Music. And I continued there through my high school graduation. I was, at those times, a kind of a wunderkind, child prodigy kind of thing. Looking back at those days, I don't know how I did it because I was an A student in school, but I was playing constantly. By the age of 16, I had played 10 concertos with symphony orchestras. I had played recitals all over the place. It's not that my parents were pushing me to do that, it's just that I was, I guess, in demand and so forth. And I was really working very hard as an adolescent. I remember one particular time when I was invited to make a tour of 5 cities in New York State, playing the Tchaikovsky B-flat minor concerto with the Russian Philharmonic on tour. And just to give you an indication of where I was at that point, I got good reviews and everybody was just oohing and ahhing all about me. And I was terribly unhappy because I knew, even though all of these people who were oohing and ahhing, I knew there was something wrong with my playing. I was a compulsive practicer in those days, probably practiced about 7-8 hours a day. I knew that I was playing incorrectly because it didn't feel right and it wasn't permanent. In other words, if I practiced 6-7 hours, I could play pretty well. The next day I would get up, and what I practiced the day before was like gone. And I'd have to practice 6-7 hours. I remember on that tour with the Tchaikovsky, we played every night, traveled by bus during the day, and I was just dying to get to a piano. If I didn't get to a piano and go over the octave passages and some of the other places that were giving me problems, I really was miserable. Well, anyway, I graduated from high school in that period. It was around 1949. And my parents wanted me to continue on into college at Eastman. My father was very, very sensible. He wanted me to get a degree, and he wanted me to aim for a teaching career to make a living. Let's face it, how else do you make a living playing the piano, except if you're maybe 9 or 10 stars. But anyway, I started in the college, and I was there for a year, and it was a very unhappy year because I knew there was something radically wrong with my playing. I was blessed right from birth with a good ear. So I could do things very incorrectly, and my ear would tell me, no, I don't want to do it this way, I don't want it to sound this way. So that my ear was guiding me in terms of what to produce on the piano. However, the way I was producing it physically was not comfortable for me. I had a very good teacher during the prep department years, very fastidious in terms of detail and so forth. But one thing that teacher did not do for me is to perceive what it was physically that I was doing that was causing me to have problems playing. Well, after that year in college, I decided I've got to get out of Rochester. I've got to go to New York. That's where it's all happening. So I did. I auditioned for Iogha, who was at the time one of the leading teachers at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. And she accepted me as a student. And the only problem was I auditioned late in the year and there was not a scholarship available. So she asked me to study with her privately that year in New York with the idea of entering Curtis the following year. The Curtis Institute in those days was the premier school in the world. They provided you with a Steinway grand piano and a partner and free tuition. In other words, you entered Curtis because the teacher accepted you as a student. And it was a very enviable situation of being accepted in Curtis. Well, anyway, I started studying with Iogha. I was living in Rochester at the time, and I flew every 2 weeks for lessons with Iogha. Iogha was Russian, one of the leading teachers in New York at that time. She taught privately in New York, but she also taught at the Curtis Institute. Many of her students were, as a matter of fact, Sergei Rachmaninoff went to Iogha to coach. Leonard Bernstein was there at the time. My goodness, Sylvia Zaremba, Gary Graffin was there. You know, a lot of good pianists were there. So anyway, I continued to study with her. And it became very apparent from almost the beginning that I here was a teacher who was going to take some getting used to. She was a tyrant, an extreme tyrant. And she scared you. She achieved her means by terror. It was a little bit hard to take for an American kid, but I took it, and she said, bring in 3 Chopin etudes every lesson from memory, and she gave me old Spontaine of Beethoven, she gave me something of Schumann, she gave me something in Prokofiev. But anyway, these lessons were very, very intense affairs. And I remember that first lesson, she spent practically the whole lesson showing me an exercise. And she stood right over my shoulder and guided everything. And if I did anything wrong, she would hit me on the shoulder. And it was quite an experience. Well, anyway, this exercise, I'll just show it to you. It was so simple, and I remember my reaction at the time. I was paying $25 a lesson. Now, in the early 50s, $25 was worth about $125 now. So she was a very expensive teacher. But she showed me this exercise, and she was so insistent that I get this and do it right. And the problem, I might say, with Iogha was she had a system, and she said, do it. Don't ask questions. Do it. And I rebelled against that simply because I am of an analytical kind of bent. I like to know what's behind what you do. I needed to have an intellectual understanding of what I was doing. Well, anyway, this exercise is very simple, very difficult at first to do. But she just simply had me sit down at the piano, put 5 fingers on 5 white keys, count to the count of 8, start from a neutral position with the fingers always touching the keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1. this exercise became the bane of my existence. But I would go home and I would practice it, and practice it, and practice it. And I was beginning very early to suspect, hey, she's onto something. She's onto something. But at the same time, I was rebelling against it because while she was hearing the pieces, then she would apply that exercise and the principles of that exercise to the pieces. And I'm not exaggerating, but I remember in Opus 110 of Beethoven, she would stand over me, and on this particular note, your hand would have to be at a certain angle. On this particular note, your hand would have to be at that angle. Your hand would have to move over for this note. It was like almost, if I had a compass on the back of my hand, taped to the back of my hand, you could almost put 180 degrees south by northwest on this note and 120 degrees northeast on this note, and just simply, you know, the system was so complicated that I had this sense of rebelling, and at the same time, she was so intense, and she imbued in me this sense that this is what you need, and you will be liberated. Well, anyway, we went on for about 6 months. So it was about equal equivalent of 3 months with lessons every week. And I was doing pieces with her, and I really felt everything she was telling me was, you must do this, you must do that, you must do that. And I really got to the point where I felt absolutely smothered musically and began to feel liberated physically. And it was a kind of a dilemma for me, because I was a naturally musical person, and I feel that I almost had an intuitive sense of what to do musically, but at the same time, she was imposing on the musical elements a very analytical way of using the hand and the arm. So I would practice, and I was really thinking very hard, and I came to the conclusion, around 5, 6 months, this was very good. No question, this is very good. But there was something in me that said, but she's going to destroy you. She's going to destroy you. So I remember it was around Christmas time, and I sat down and I wrote her a letter telling her that I would have very strong reservations of whether it would be good for me to study with her. And it was the most painful period of my life. It was very traumatic. I discussed it with my parents, and of course they could only conclude, if you don't like it, quit. So anyway, I left. I did not stay within there. But of course, I gave up my opportunity for Curtis. And, I could have gone to Seraphim, or I could have gone to Horozhovsky, but I didn't want to study with Rudolf Seraphim, because Rudolf Seraphim wouldn't give me what I was needing. It's physical. I didn't like his physical approach to piano. So anyway, January through May or June, no college. I was at home, nothing to do. It was a very barren time for me. But in those 3 or 4 months, I applied what she told me. And that is the time when I learned how to play the piano. I played the piano before, but then I really learned how to play the piano. So, in the meantime, I went to Juilliard and I auditioned with Rosita Levine. She accepted me, and the following fall I went to Juilliard. But I'm telling you this story because I think there were probably 2 or 3 moments in my life when it was like an epiphany. Something came at me. It was what I needed, but I took what she told me and I made it my own. And as a result of that experience with her, I really can say that my teacher was Isabel Iogha, and yet I was with her the shortest time. I had 4 very fine teachers, also studied with Iogha, and I studied with Rosita Levine. And out of that, I got something of all of those teachers. I think that if you you study with 10 teachers, you will get something from everyone. There's always something that will make you hit the right spot. Teaching is a very diagnostic profession. It's like a doctor. You have to try to get inside the student and analyze what is it that they need, what will liberate them, what will release them from their frustrations and their difficulties. So anyway, I went to Juilliard and I studied with Rosina. It was a great time in a different way. I had a great class, John Browning, David Barguilan, Van Cliburn, a lot of good students there. Juilliard is a great school. I'll tell you why it's a great school. It has the best students in the world. Not necessarily the best teachers, but the best students. Students make you look good, right? If you have good students, you will always look good as a teacher. So, but anyway, it was a nice experience. Rosina was of a different type of teacher. She was a great, great lady. You had a sense of a true connection with the past. She knew Brahms, she knew Tchaikovsky. She was, her husband, of course, was Joseph Levine, the great pianist. And what I got out of Levine was more aesthetic, musical things. She was not at all interested in the mechanics of playing the piano. But by that time, I had really developed a sense of what I needed to play and to play anything. And the basic message of what Van Gogh was saying is sound. How do you make beautiful sound on the piano? With her, there was only one way down into the keys. Implant your way. Her philosophy was basically very simple. If I just draw a side view, this is the shoulder. This is the elbow. This is the forearm and the hand. When you sit at the piano, to maximize leverage in your center of gravity, you should be sitting in such a way that the center of gravity of the body is inclined toward the keyboard. So that the weight of the body goes into the forearm. This tangent of the triangle is the invisible tangent. Now, if you're sitting at the piano wrong, let's draw another diagram. Shoulder, elbow, hand. I'll illustrate it this way. And here I had to stand up and open the lid of the piano. I still use this with students. She had me stand about 3 feet from the piano. She opened the lid. I couldn't. She said, why can't you open the lid? Well, I'm not standing close to it. She said, stand close to it. Now open the lid. She said, if you sit at the piano this way, your center of gravity is here. If I faint right now, where am I going to fall? I'm going to fall back here. You have to sit at the piano in such a way that your center of gravity is toward the key. In other words, the inactive tangent, the active tangent, and the invisible tangent of the triangle. If you sit, now keep in mind, this will vary with everyone because we have all kinds of body sizes and shapes. You have 6'4" people and you have 4'8" people. You have people with long upper arms. You know, I don't know if you've seen Archer, the great Archer Rubinstein play, but he was always, always pictured this way. But the reason he was that way was because he was of normal height. Actually, he was about an inch shorter than I am. But he had arms like an ape. They went down to his knees. So you're dealing with different sizes and shapes. But that means that the bench can be adjusted I remember in my class at Crane, I had a little Korean girl, 4 feet 8, and I had a basketball type of player, 6'3" or 4, and the basketball player was all legs, very little torso. The Korean girl was mostly torso with very, very short legs. And it was funny, one day she was playing, and she put the bench way, way down. And then, just by coincidence, he came up and played, and he had the bench way, way up. So you see, he had a very short torso. He had to sit higher. She had a very long torso. She had to sit lower. So, and what I'm explaining here is simply, that's the ideal, but will vary with every single person at the keyboard. But when you're assuming this position, this is inactive. There should be nothing here. All of the activity in playing the piano is from the elbow to the fingertip. The weight, you know, I might just put it aside here. I had a few lessons in master class with a Hungarian teacher at Easton when I was in the prep department. And it was all shoulders and back. And that really messed me up for a while too, because, he was, everything comes from the shoulder and the back muscles. Well, what that Vera was saying was the total opposite of that. She said all that's involved in playing the piano is from the elbow to this. If your body is inclined, if your center of gravity is correct, you will have all the weight you need and all the power you need applied through the forearm. Well, anyway, before that time at Iogha, I was one of these punchers, keyboard punchers, In other words, it was from the high wrist leaning down. I used to sit very high when I was a teenager. And after Iogha, I began to sit lower, lower, lower. Now, at this point in my life, I'm down to the bottom of the chair. So I guess it's really that's where we go. But Iogha was trying to illustrate the idea that if you I'm using nothing back here, I'm using nothing here. It's all the speed of my stride, She made piano playing very easy. I might digress just a little bit and go back to the prep department at Eastman to point out these different philosophies of playing the keyboard. There is a book that was given to me when I was a teenager by my teacher called The Active Touch by Tobias Matte. And my teacher felt that I should read that book. And it is a fascinating book because it is very scientific in the sense that it analyzes how to play the piano. The problem with that book, and when I read it, it was really a very complicated book for a teenager to read and understand. I did get something out of it, but the whole concept was playing should be effortless. You should be relaxed at all times. And of course, to an impressionable teenager, all teenagers tend to exaggerate everything. Well, I did. I became a little nothing in my playing as a result. There is a book that has the contrary philosophy, Ortman's book, The Physiological Mechanics of Piano Technique, which proves that Matte was wrong. Piano playing is not indeed an absence of tension. Good piano playing is not an absence of tension. Because he used slow motion movie cameras and he had photographed artists and all kinds of things. It's a very thick book. And he proved that Matte was totally wrong. And actually, I read both books when I was very young, and I concluded very soon after that somewhere between Matte and Ortman was the truth. And then Iogha clinched it for me. She said, all good piano playing needs tension, applied in exactly the right moment, followed immediately by relaxation and recovery from tension. Now, going back to this exercise, the moment I play a given note, for a split instant, there is tension. You can see it in the ligaments of my hand rising up. But when I rise, I'm totally relaxed. I should be totally relaxed. When I come down fast, at a certain point, it forces the finger to depress the key, and there is the shock absorber effect in the joint. So that you can see on the ligaments of my hand, probably no more than a tenth of a second, you'll see the ligaments appear and disappear. And the philosophy was that when you depress the keys, if you want to get any kind of tone, there needs to be tension. But it's recovery from tension that causes you to go on and on forever and never get stressed or tired. And that was really a revelation to me. The problem with Vengerova, and really the reason why I left her, is Vengerova said, do it. Don't ask me. Do it. And I probably rebelled more against that than anything. But in those 3 months or so after I left Vengerova, I, by myself, in my own piano, figured out what she was talking about. And I developed, took all of these things that she said and showed me, no questions asked. And then I applied them. And it was the most liberating moment of my life because I really felt, now I know why I felt so bad when I played. So I really call that a moment of epiphany. But I think I'm telling you this because I want to make another larger point, which I think is important for all teachers to recognize. I think the primary purpose of a teacher in piano is to give the students the tools to learn their craft. It's the tools that the students need. It's very easy to say, play softer there, play lighter here, make a crescendo here, do this, use this finger here, do that. You're not really telling the student what the student needs to know. What the student needs to know is what are they doing that's hindering them from that. Oh, sure, the student, they can assume all kinds of funny positions. And if you tell them, play softer here, yeah, they'll play softer. But what they need to know if they want to do anything in the instrument, with the instrument, is how to do it so it's effective, it creates beautiful sound, it gives you the freedom physically to do anything you want to. And I think probably even more than musicality, to me the most important thing in teaching is to give the student the tools to play the instrument well. And I think implicit in that is the idea that you need to diagnose every student. No students I heard in this last 2 days, there's no one student that you could say the same thing to. They all could be taught in slightly different ways. You would have to know them, you'd have to know their personality. But to me, that's the most important thing that you can give to a student. To set them off right, if possible, as early an age as possible.
That's all right, thank you. I'm looking for beach one.
Oh, she's going to be out by the hall. She had her home for something.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
And that's the kind of teacher I vowed that I would become. And when I did go into teaching, that's another story too, because in the days when I studied with Vengerova, I had vowed that I would never be a teacher. If I were forced into teaching, I would do anything. I'd even join the Foreign Legion. I'd do anything to get away from teaching. I didn't want to teach. And but then after I graduated from school, and shortly after, a few years, I got married, and I began a playing career. I traveled quite a bit. Mostly I played the first few years with Leonard Rose, the cellist. We traveled all over, and I played with other artists. It was getting to a point where I was very much in demand as a collaborator. Itzhak Perlman called me when he was 15 and wanted me as his pianist, and who else? Zino Francescani, Nathan Bilstein, and it got to the point where I had to make a decision. what am I going to do with my life? Am I going to be a professional freelance accompanist? Or am I going to earn a living somehow that will enable me to continue as a pianist, not only solo, but I love chamber music and orchestra. And so anyway, I remember after about 5 years of playing with Rose, I had to make a decision very fast. What am I going to do? And it was a hard decision indeed, but I think I made the right decision. I gave up professional company completely and decided I had better get my master's very quickly and go to university teaching, and that's what I did. And I'm glad I did, because teaching has given me a great deal that I never dreamed it would. It's a very gratifying profession, especially, I think, if you extend yourself to the point where it's not just you're concerned about the personality and the personal well-being of the student, but you're more concerned about their problems relative to playing the piano, and what can you do in terms of analyzing to help them through those difficult years when they're groping for things. It's very easy as a teacher to teach pieces for competitions or for recitals and so forth, and make that your goal. But I would say one thing. I have never liked competitions. They are a necessary evil. They perhaps are good in the sense that it gives us kind of a glamour for the student to achieve and strive for. But be very careful that the competition or the performances or learning pieces is the only goal that you're after as a teacher. If you can also give them something that will last a lifetime, that they can make grow, that to me is the more important thing that can happen in teaching. So, as a result of being with Iogha, I can look back at those years and I can say to myself, she gave me something that lasted a lifetime, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew. And she gave me something that I could then put in my way and convey to my students. And Helen can be a witness to this. I was never as mean as Iogha, possibly, right? Right. I was very demanding that the student would try to, if they need to make changes, to make them. I want to just spend the rest of the time just talking about a few general principles, some of which Iogha gave. Now, this diagram that I drew, I think, is probably the most important thing that you can give to a student right at the beginning. Because most students, I find, when you do their first lesson, this is the way they look. They sit down, and if the chip bench happens to be high, no matter, they just start playing. And this is what you see. You see the elbows way up here, and you see the wrist way up here. You see that kind of touching the keyboard. And I asked, aren't you tight? No. Feels good. The problem is that if I were to give them a piece of list with octaves in it, they couldn't play it. Because with that kind of stiffness, there's no way that they can play it. So anyway, I look right at the beginning, and Helen will be a witness to this, and all the students were experiencing this. If I saw that a student was doing something that I knew they would never get better, I would change it. Simply because I felt that pays off for the future. So, coming back to this again, I tell them, you sit at the piano in whatever height the bench will fit your body, but I want you to sit in such a way that your elbow in the underside of your forearm is behind me. Yeah, that's as far as it goes. See, I go lower, so. But anyway, the elbow side, the forearm, is level with the keyboard. Now, when that happens, and when I'm sitting up straight, I just drop my hand. There it is. Mass in motion creates energy. Mass the forearm. Drop the forearm, and there. The other principle I give to the students is, how do you produce sound? How do you play a loud tone? And they think, well, you push your finger into the key. And where they do all kinds of things. They say all kinds of things. But there are basically three principles to tone production. The speed at which you strike any key determines the quantity of the sound that you get, whether you play loud or whether you play soft. The speed is the factor that controls that. Now, coming back to the Iogha exercise, a variant of that exercise was simply, I can change the grid of counting so that I can go up to the count of 6, down 6, 7, 8, 1, and I can change the speed of my drop, therefore changing the speed of my strike. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. It was a continuous motion, no tension, perfectly graceful motion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. I am absolutely sure that when I touch the bottom of the key, that tone will come out as I want it to be. Now, I'm sure you've all seen students, you tell them to go softer, immediately. They tiptoe on the keys, right? You can feel the levitation in the room. It's like their body just kind of goes out tiptoe. And you see, that's totally contrary to the Iogha principle. The softest tone must reach the bottom of the key with the full weight of the arm. And that's a hard concept to get across to students, because your impulse is to say, if I want to play triple piano, I'm not going to let my wrist and arm go down all the way. I'm going to hold back. But it is true, if you learn to implant your weight, I am going all the way down until my wrist is straight, back up. All right, the second principle of tone production, first one is quantity, how much sound. Quality of sound, what kind of sound do we want? And here is where the Russian school comes in, because no other school kind of approaches this. The angle of your strike determines the quality of your sound. What kind of sound do you want to have? A warm singing sound? Do you want a percussive sound? Do you want a wispy sound? The angle at which you strike the key. Now, you're probably going to say, well, what's this with angle? I mean, you just push the key down. How the finger addresses the key determines to a large extent the quality of your sound. If I want to play percussively, sure, you're going to go straight in. If I want to get, therefore, the angle of strike is almost horizontal. If I want to play something that is very, what the French call the jeu perlé, the string of pearl type of playing, where you, something very bright and clear, I'm going to use the tip of the finger. If I want to play a wispy quality, I literally wet the key and go up. Angle of strike determines the quality of your sound. Now, in order to get flat on the fingers, you have to be down. You cannot be up. If you're up, this is what happens. You don't have any leverage to the key. And the third principle is the amount of weight that you apply. Naturally, if you're going to play double forte, you really give all your weight. And you can withhold your weight too. This kind of touch is very desirable. You know, when you, where you, in a sense, levitate your weight as you're producing, as you're going down, you will simply lift your weight up and wipe the key. Levine was the big one for sound. I wish that there were videotapes of Levine, because when she talked about sound, she got absolutely, she was insane. Because to her, the whole Russian legislative school was all beautiful, warm sound. And she had this metaphor for sound. It was always pulling the keyboard towards you. She said, come to me, draw the sound out of the piano, come to me. You know, it was always this way, toward you. And I remember doing several Chopin pieces with her, and you know, it was just about the Schumann dance at the spot where she was That's why I think it's very important to think about what the student is doing and experiment, because the Russian school is very much dedicated to the idea of implanting the weight down into the key, not pushing the weight into it. Now, there are schools, you know, there are certain schools of piano playing that you've probably seen it, what I call the bird on the wing type of playing, you know, where you expect the person to begin to take off the ground, you know, the arms go up, and, you know, that produces a very nice sound too. But, you know, now, that's a good way to do it, because on the downswing, you're going down into the key. The problem is that you've got all of this. It's, to me, it's very visually distracting. Because Vengerva was also very eloquent on look like how you want the music to sound. If you want to play a long phrase, play the phrase with your body. If you want to look like the phrase is noble and soaring, you don't do that with every note, you see. And, you know, that was another thing that really impressed me a great deal. Levine was a big one for legato. She, you couldn't fool her. She would turn her back and she'd go and open the window or something. You're playing something. So you're not playing legato. And of course, with her, the pedal was not legato. You know, the pedal didn't make legato. If you wanted a legato passage, you did with the fingers. And with her, she was the one that tipped me off to all the possibilities of finger substitution. You can go miles on the piano if you learn how to substitute fingers. And after studying with Levine, my music got to be all marked up with fingering that I worked out. And fingering is an individual thing. But you also want to remember, on these editions now, these newfangled editions that they have, which I'm totally disapproving of, because some of them, the editing is very bad. As a matter of fact, I ran into a couple of editions in the last couple of days where the fingering was unbelievably bad. You don't have to believe the editor. There are certain principles of fingering that are true for everyone. And I just got through with a lesson where, the student was forced into the narrow part of the key. How can you get really good sound down in here? It's better if you're back here. That's where you get the best sound. But the addition forced you to go into the narrow part of the key. So in other words, don't believe everything you see in the printed page. Fingering should be a creative thing. And if a fingering doesn't work for a student, try another fingering. But the principles involved, and again, this is where I wish I had more time, because the principles involved in fingering are very, very simple. Number one, whenever possible, play in the wide part of the wide key toward the front. Number two, avoid as much as possible playing in between the black keys. Of course, that's not always possible, we know. But number three, for smaller hands, playing chords, the overhang at the edge of the key is invaluable. Students very often will try to play octave chords way up here with their fifth finger straddling, and you see the note next to it going down with small hands. Now, if they would just simply come to the edge of the key, they would have much better grasp and not risk playing angry notes with the fifth finger. The tilt of the hand in playing chords is very, very important. Certain chords demand that you tilt the hand. I've tried this with students, and it works marvelous. You get a girl that maybe has a smaller hand, and she has a dominant seventh octave chord, let's say a C dominant seventh, which is kind of hard for most hands. Now, she was playing it straight away, and her hand was just like river chords, like that. So I said, okay, let's just try. Just relax your hand. And immediately, when she relaxed her hand, it went over into the tilt position. Some chords, like this chord, the chord next to it, the diminished chord, you will need to tilt this way. But again, it depends on the length of the fingers. But the principle is the tilt of the fingers and the hand can do wonders in terms of making a small hand operate more efficiently. Pedaling. We tend to think, press the pedal down. When it's time to change, you go up, down. There are all kinds of variations of pedaling. As a matter of fact, I talked about that this morning in the master class. People don't use enough of what I call thinning out the pedal. A lot of times in very loud passages, you'll find that if you change the pedal in sequence rapidly in loud passages, it will still be blurred. But if you play something in which you can thin the pedal out, thinning meaning gradually lift the pedal so that the sound actually decays gradually, what you're doing is thinning out the sound, and then the pedal is ready to go down at the proper moment. I don't know if I can think of all right, yeah, all right, I figured that. Third or fourth variation of the drums. Now, I am playing what we call a thinning pedal. So without the thinning pedal, I'm changing the pedal to the proper places, but you see it's kind of muddy. But instead, do you hear what I did? Over those three notes, the pedal gradually came up. So when you go faster, it sounds like you're connecting everything, but you're not flooding the sound. So that would work. That doesn't work. So what I'm doing essentially is gradually thinning out the pedal, and it works wonders. Matter of fact, we were doing this morning with one of the students. Half pedaling, a lot of times when you have rapid changes of pedaling, students will push the pedal all the way down, or all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. Remember one thing, when the dampers go off the strings, a 32nd of an inch, it's almost the same as being off the strings a quarter. You don't have to depress the pedal all the way down. When you have rapid changes of pedal, it's better to pedal shallow, just enough down so that changing the pedal means a smaller range of motion with your foot, and you get much more effective pedaling out of it, much cleaner pedaling. I mean, a good example is, again, another variation of one of the Browns, where you have now they're actually changing every single note, but I'm getting very near the top, right here. He said it's a full range of motion of the pedal, and it's much more effective when that you have to change rapidly. I can remember a few other things. I gave brought some notes from the master class. Let me just read you some of the topics that I talked about at Iowa State. Yeah, another thing I might talk about too is learning. You require your students to memorize, that's fine. Right. But I found in teaching in college, whenever you told a student you got to memorize your pieces for your exam, oh, I can't memorize. I'll never be able to do that. Well, of course, they were never asked to memorize when they were. The problem, I think, basically is that, and I hope you'll understand what I mean by this. Students are taught to learn how to read very early. That's absolutely essential. But in America, and particularly in the mainland, I get a feeling that reading becomes the real goal. In other words, sight reading. And I have nothing against sight reading. The better reader you are, the better, easier it is for you. But I want to make one thing clear. Students learn to stare at the music, stare at the music, and stare at the music. They can be on a piece 10 weeks, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. They're still staring at the music. They don't know what their hands are doing, and they don't hear what they're doing. And at my work at Crane, very often I would tell a student, look, let's take the music down. They say, oh, I can't. No, I can't. Let's play. If you get stuck, I'll show you. And I'm forcing the student to look away from the music. I know that when they practice, they open the music. We had a saying at Crane, teachers, about sight reading. Good sight readers, the first time they play a piece is the best it's ever going to get. And you know, it sounds like a joke, but it's the truth. I have had students who were very good readers. Once that first lesson they brought a piece in, it was a struggle to get any better. Because the little black dots were all the all-important thing. That little dots of ink on the page were the goal. Not what the hand was doing, what sound was produced, what pedaling, what color of sound, what nuance. It was the goal of making the fingers work, not looking at the hands. And please don't misunderstand, because I am all for good reading and good habits for reading. But there comes a time when you don't need to look at the music anymore if you have studied the music properly. Memorization will come as a byproduct of good, solid learning. But how are you going to learn beyond reading the black dots unless you look down, see what your hands are doing, what finger you're using, hear what pedaling you're using? In other words, the one thing that probably made me most miserable as a teacher was countering this keyboard as typewriter syndrome. And very often I pulled the music away from the student because I could see their eyes were glassed over. they weren't even looking at the music anymore. They were thinking of what movie they're going to see, their date with their boyfriend, who knows. They weren't thinking. It's so easy to have that music in front of you and not think. So I don't want to go into this anymore. I will just say simply that memorization is a byproduct of good, solid practice, not a separate process at the end. Tonight, well, now we learn the piece. Now, let's memorize the piece. That seems to me to be backwards. You see? You don't memorize as a separate process. Students, I have worked so hard to convince students that if you study what fingering to use and go over that, try several fingerings, that, in a sense, is right there, a memorization, because you're using muscle memory to key you in to what's going on at that point. Now your mind is focused on playing that with the fingers. What fingers to play? Now, let's not kid ourselves. Muscle memory is a very important aspect of playing the piano. It gets a bad name by some people, but muscle memory is what really will help you get through when nobody can be on 100% all of the time when they're playing. The brain just doesn't function that way. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you, and I hope you'll understand, sight reading is very good. It's a good skill to develop. But I think that students need to be goaded into knowing how to learn their pieces. And they will then memorize them without even thinking. I mean, I happen to be a very quick memorizer. You give me a Bach fugue and I can probably memorize it in 48 hours. Because I hate reading music. I find that reading music gets in my way. So that what I do is I play a phrase over and, kind of decide what finger I'm going to use quickly and play a few times. And then a day later, it kind of goes, after 2 or 3 days, it's there. So, but I memorize mostly because I have a strong sense of what my fingers and my hand is doing. And I come back to what I said at the beginning, studying what the hand moves the sound, how to move on the keyboard. I hope I can have the opportunity sometime to come back and spend more time talking about this, because there are certain principles that I think are very important. How to do skips and jumps on the keyboard with grace and accuracy, all kinds of things. But the idea of being able to make the student learn beyond the little black dots is where I am appealing to you to get them to get under the surface of the black dots, under the surface. Because those little black dots are the most destructive thing, in my opinion, for the student. Sure, you can have the music in front of you, but I have seen students stare at it hypnotically. And it just bothers me, because then if I tell them, you learn the pedal here, and they kind of look at me, I didn't hear that. So, there are a lot of things that I've learned in teaching. But I wanted to relate the story to you mostly because it was a personal experience that changed me. And I think I've heard some students that look very good and sound very good. And I've heard some students that maybe might be better pianists if they were maybe tension. Tension is the worst thing in playing. Excess tension. And I tell the students a lot of times, because I'm trying to dispel the shoulder approach to playing. Do you walk around school this way? No. Why do you play the piano that way? The other thing that reinforced my feeling about playing in a natural way, I used to see when I was a youngster orchids every end of the year in Rochester, or Rubinstein, Cassadesu, Myra Hess, all of the great artists. I found that they all had one thing in common. They sat at the piano silently and nobly. Nothing moved except the forearms and the fingers. And that made a big impression on me, because that's why I'm sometimes criticized for being too quiet a player. I don't know very much. Because the mechanism, to me, has to be under control. I know there are pianists who can play very convincingly and weave and bob around and roll and, you know, do all kinds of histrionics. But I, of the school that says, like Rubinstein, when he was asked, how do you produce your marvelous sound? He said, I don't know. All I know is that I feel my soul in my fingertip. So, do you need to, you know, do all of these things? In other words, excess extraneous motion in playing the piano only makes it more impossible to relax. And remember, when you're playing, tension is necessary, but dissipation of tension is even more necessary. So that even, just to give you an illustration, it is one thing. Just very fast octaves. Between each one of those octaves, my fingers and my hand relaxes, even at that speed. In other words, I'm never tight. I never tighten up the hand, you know, like a statue, so that I'm recovering from tension with every single note. And again, it's coming back to that exercise. That simple, stupid little exercise. I got a lot of mileage out of that. I got a lot of mileage with teaching too. Because I would get a freshman that looked like, you know, rigor mortis, and they would go out sometimes so relaxed I'd have to kind of starch them up a bit. But at least you can get results from it. Anyway, I'm going to stop for now. Please, I want to express my thanks to you people for inviting me. I've enjoyed this thoroughly.
Sitting the way it says so low.
Who's that?
I would David Pratt. What advantages do you think that he does from sitting?
I think they have a lot of advantages. Because what? Glenn Gould had one of the enormous sounds, and he sat probably the lowest of any pianist. The lower you sit, the more you're apt to address the keyboard with that grasp impact.
What do you mean like this? You know,
Yeah, well, no, I couldn't get my nose that close to the keyboard myself. And there again, everybody's different. But the main thing is, it's not necessary that you have to imitate somebody. He just happens to sit that way. I saw him play, and he gets really, his face gets, you know, way down. He's using like this. I can never do that. But that's what he does. But I think it's more advantageous to sit lower rather than higher. For the simple reason that when you're lower, as a matter of fact, you might try this sometime. Sit on the floor and play, reach out and play. You'd be amazed the kind of sound you get. But you know, if you just get down like this. Then you're doing what Levine said, you're really grasping your knees. Just get on your knees sometimes, try it. So easy to play.
okay, another thing. When you were demonstrating like one tone, one finger, there was one motion. How would you apply that to fast 64 passages?
How would you apply to what?
That technique to fast notes, fast 16 notes.
You know, you see, I'm glad you brought that up because I left that out. What that exercise is, it's a theoretical exercise. You don't play the piano that way. No. What Bandera had me do was this, you know. Because what that does is strengthen the forearm muscles. It really tones up the muscles. And then, you know, doing scales of it. But no, when you play, like, you know, but to practice, you would have a piano that way. What it does is it's a control exercise. It's really an arm control exercise. When you learn to control the muscles of your arm in terms of speed, then you will be able to go down into the keys. Most of the reason why students are afraid to go down and find it easier to hit the keys is because when you ask them to play softly, their impulse is, oh, no, I can't go down, I'll play too loud, because they don't know how to control their arm. So that exercise is really an arm control exercise, but it's not how you play the piano. But if I'm playing, look, if I'm playing, I can do that, or I can do. But the main thing is I'm not. See? Yeah, now there's no leverage, you see. But students love to play with high wrists, and really that's the problem. This gets you down. It gets you down into the keyboard. You know, the implanted. Yes.
I have to avoid the place like that. When you know, I can start somebody else. Anyway, yeah, I can just play.
Well, you know, is he getting down? All right, hold his wrist, and you know, he'll learn. Hold his wrist.
Water with it. No, we can keep it.
Yeah.
About the memorization, do you think that the knowledge of harmony and form
Oh yes, definitely.
would help with memorization?
Definitely. I mean, this is where, you know, there's so much I couldn't talk about. But, you know, when a student has knowledge of the tensions of harmony, 1, 5, 4, 6, you know, yes, very definitely. So we take that for granted. In the training, you know, I don't know how much you do of theory, but I hope that while they're taking lessons, there's some way that they can get theoretical training. Because unless they understand the whole harmonic system, then, you know, yes, definitely. And that will help you to memorize.
Is it advantageous with a good photographic memory?
Well, some people do. Very few people do, but a photographic memory is handy to have. But no, what I'm saying, I think, is, you know, the 4 pillars of learning. There are 4 ways that you learn in playing the piano. You learn visually. You learn orally, your ear. After you hear something a few times, you learn by ear. You learn analytically. Some students, you know, they kind of look at the bass line and, oh, the bass line moves this way. That's a 6 chord going to a 4 chord going to a 2 chord, you know. You learn analytically. And the most important thing is, whether you like it or not, it gets into your muscle memory. What they call the kinesthetic response. Your muscles go. Your reflex, you learn a piece as reflex muscle action.
Another thing about memorization, when an artist performs a formal recital, from your point of view, is it all right for an artist to use a score, or should they have it all memorized?
Well, fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with using the score. As a matter of fact, I think that's a big concern with a lot of people. I brought, we have a photocopier at home, and I brought all of the music in photocopy form with me in a notebook. Rather than drug out all of those books, you know, all of these Brahms and Handel, and then one big thick book, but the Messiaen was that thick. Forget it. I'm not going to take that, you know, on the plane. So what I did, but the music that I have in that program, 250 pages of music. Now, a lot of people feel the strain of memorizing that much music. A lot of people do. It's understandable. There's no reason why you can't take music with you on the stage. As a matter of fact, I just heard a marvelous performance a few weeks ago in our hometown in the orchestra concert. Lee Movisi, a very fine pianist, played a Mozart concerto with the orchestra, and he brought out his music in a notebook. He wasn't looking at it for like 98% of the time, but there was a certain passage he just wanted. It was fine, no problem. The problem with music is, if you look at the music, music unnecessarily, you are then not concerned with other things. You see, looking at music, you're not at all concerned necessarily with how you're doing it, what you're doing. You see, the whole point of playing is to lift off the page what the information there, and so much that's not on the page that the performer keeps. You know, when you stop to think of it, of all of the arts, the visual arts, and so forth, music, the printed page of music is the most unlike the art of music. I mean, those little black dots don't look anything like music to me. Whereas if you read a book, well, obviously you have the alphabet, you know, we understand that forms words. If you go to a museum, an art gallery, you see, your eyes take in that. You see, that's art. But music is an art, and the only way it exists is on that printed page, looking nothing like it sounds. So that to me is just an instruction manual. It's like you want to ski jump, you want to learn how to ski jump, read the manual before going down, right? Don't read it as you're going down, right? So I think to me, music would get in my way. I just don't want it there. It gets in my way. But I can understand how certain people really feel that. But if they feel a certain piece they want the music, sure, you can take it out. I don't see anything wrong with that. The main thing is, if it helps you to play more musically and you feel freer, fine. I just find, you know, just the fact that you have to turn pages. I'm the world's worst page turner. You know, I reach over and I can't get, you know, the whole thing goes down. So, you know, it's just a matter of personal preference. There's no reason why a person can't, let's say you're playing a couple of pieces on the program, and one piece bothers you, take the music out.
It's a rebel.
I mean, you know, there's nothing, you can do whatever you want. The important thing is how well you play. I've seen people play with the music and they play beautifully. Of course, whenever you're playing chamber music or accompanying, I think it's very wise. Because you see, chamber music, you're playing an incomplete part. And with accompanying, let's say something happened and there's no music to refer to, you know. So whenever more than one person is involved, anything can happen. So with chamber music, yes, you always use. I remember the days when I played with Rose, I knew every single note of his part and my part. But I always took the music for one reason. When I didn't have music, and I tried several times just for the fun of it, just play the concert without music. He wasn't using music. And I found that I began to wander. I wandered into my way of playing. Oh, maybe I want to take a little bit more time here. The music in front of me represented a cohesion of two people playing. That was the metaphor for, you see. So to me, the music was important because it reminded me of my partner. If I didn't have it, I would tend to kind of look off in the distance and begin up on a retard a little bit. I go my own way. Well, of course, that's not nice. Listen to your partner. See, I'm solo. I love to play solo because you have the most freedom when you're playing solo. But when you're playing with somebody, you have to, you have to.
Well, that's a
I
question.
know some people are coming out to the recital, so if you need to go,
Yeah.
please feel free.
Can I just ask one last question? I'll keep it light.
Yeah.
Okay, in the piano training, do you think there's enough emphasis on ensemble playing? Like chamber music?
One of the best ways to teach, I find, is to have a four-hand or eight-hand. Take Mozart symphonies or Haydn symphonies, and that's one of the best ways to get the students to play. I know we did that at Eastman Rep Department. That was exciting. You might try that. All you need is these four-hand music or eight hands. And you get the students at two pianos. And you say, okay, here we go. They have to keep up. And it does really help. That's one of the best ways. Yeah. Piano ensemble is very good, especially for sight reading. It's very valuable. Because they have to keep up with their partner, and they would be very embarrassed if they fell by the wayside, right? So, we try.
Thank you very much.